Welcome to the Backstage Creative, the podcast that focuses on the people who work behind the scenes of theater. My name is Krista Copper. As a musician, one of my favorite parts of theater is watching a production come together during Tech Week, watching people work so hard to make it happen, watching the collaborations and the group problem solving that happens to make a production come to life. I would also like to just bring more awareness to what happens behind the scenes. I think once you realize the amount of hard work and passion and sacrifice that goes into creating a musical or a play, you have a deeper appreciation for it. And so that's one of my hopes with this podcast is that whether you work professionally in theater or as an amateur or just enjoy watching shows, you'll be able to appreciate theater more because of the conversations with the people that I have on this show. If you like the Backstage Creative, I would love to know. Feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, or you could head on over to Facebook and like the Backstage Creative podcast page. Send me a message. I love to hear what people think, especially during this crazy pandemic time. It's always nice to connect with people, and so I would love to hear from you. Today is my conversation with Lawrence Moten, who is a scenic designer. We had some technical difficulties during this recording, so I had to record the conversation a different way than normal. So the sound quality is maybe not the best, and I wasn't able to edit out all of the background extra sounds that I like to edit out. But the content is great. So once you get into it, hopefully it won't be too big of a distraction. So here we go. Here's my conversation with Lawrence Moten. Creativity and instinct, and how I think we all have that instinct in us
from the day we're born.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're creative individuals as children, right? We tell stories, we draw, we create imaginative worlds. And I do think that we're inherently creative. Mm-hmm. Like I would drive that point home. I think everyone thinks, right, we're not creative, or we don't do the thing. We're not creative enough. And I just don't think that that's real.
Yeah, I don't know who heard this story from, but there was some study, and they took a group of kindergartners and they asked the kindergartners, who thinks they're a good artist, and they all raised their hands, and and then in second grade, okay, who thinks they're a good artist, and like half of them raise their hands, and then you get to like fifth or sixth grade, and you ask that question, and maybe one kid will raise their hand. It's as you get older, you're told you're not creative or you're not artistic, but I think when we're little, like, we're all creative and artistic. We lose that as we get older.
Agreed.
Yeah. So let's talk about working on a design team. As the scenic designer, how I understand it, you're kind of the first, you kind of lay the groundwork for everyone else. Would that be a good way to think about a scenic designer?
I think the joy and difficulty of being a scenic designer is you're often the one who has to have the first idea. Mm-hmm. Right, you're often the first creative that's contacted, and even if they're still finishing building the rest of the team, you and the director might already be having conversations, which isn't always great. Often I would say it's not great. I like to have the first conversation with as many of the creatives as possible in the room, just that where all of our ideas are in the pot. But yeah, that's the thing. It's the first round of research, it's the first sketch, it's putting yourself out there from your initial reactions and your gut instinct on a visual level for everyone else to then respond to or put in their ideas or what's going into the stew to make everything come out. Mm-hmm. I love it. I had to get used to it.
Yeah.
Which is fun. But it was just a thing that was, especially in the professional world, was new to me as I got larger and larger projects and the stakes got higher and higher. It just became a thing. But it becomes natural, right? Like the practice of that, that's the thing. I've gotten far more used to saying, well, this could be a dumb idea or this could be a great idea. Like, what's this? Here's this thing. Mm-hmm. What do we think about it? Mm-hmm. And it's often, the we, the royal we of what's the team think about it. because we are a collaborative art, and I want to know that we are serving the play appropriately from all perspectives. And that, like, if I have a great design idea, but the lighting designer can't light it, or it clashes with the costumes, or the director can't get the right blocking on stage, or doesn't feel like that serves the story, then we go back to square one. But yeah, it is all about kind of having that first idea as a set designer.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like pressure. So, like, there's some pressure involved with that.
Yes, but it's funny because I prefer the pressure then, right? It's always we talk about in theater that when set designers get into tech, they're often drafting their next show. Because our work happens so early and the show has to be built and painted, my work is often done and the pressure is front loaded. And in tech, we're refining the visual elements. We're making sure that those things gel with what the lighting designer, the costume designer, the sound designer, the actors are doing. Often my job at that point is to make sure that I've made the world correct for the actors. So it's a lot of set dressing or adjustments to make sure that the actors, as they're moving through space, feel like they're in control of their world. Because, like, right, a lighting designer and a sound designer, more than the set and costume designer, their work starts first day of tech in the sense of, like, they're laying their first paint strokes on. And those first 45 minutes to an hour, as we're developing the conversation in tech, I would crumble under that pressure if I was a lighting or a sound designer. Would not be a thing. I'm just not trained for it. But I have mounds of respect for those lighting designers, for the sound designers who, you know, first cue gets played, or let's put up the first lighting look. Is my idea going to work?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of pressure, I have a lot of respect for it.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's all, everyone's like sitting in the theater just waiting for you. Yeah, yeah.
So yes, there is pressure in set design. It happens for me so much further before we get into the room for tech. So I'm far more comfortable in the tech process. Not to say there isn't still pressure. Big ideas, set changes, movements, scenery changes. Have we blocked them or not? Is the dressing right? But at that point, I feel ready to take on that challenge.
Mm-hmm. How do you handle criticism of your work?
I think it's necessary. It's a necessary part of the growth of design. I don't take critics' reviews as seriously as some people might. I think I read them because they can make or break the ticket sales of a show. But I think that my colleagues, if any of my colleagues come up to me and say, this thing isn't working for me, that's an honest critique. And I'll take it. If an actor comes up to me and says, this isn't working for me on set, that's an honest critique. I am always, my goal is to get out of the way of the actors and let them tell the story and support that story and support their action on stage. So if I haven't done that, tell me. If it's not working for you, if an idea that I had in the theoretical as we were developing this idea isn't working on stage, in the room, in the moment, physically, then we change it. And I think that critique is honest and real. And I'll have those conversations post-mortem with colleagues and with friends who've seen the show and ask for the honest critique. I think that's important to get that other viewpoint, to see the forest through the trees, right? The person who's not so invested in the moment and in the project that can take a step back and say, this worked, this didn't. It's in the same way of like a designer run right before we go into tech, or the presentation of the design ideas to an artistic director or a board or what it might be. Those people who aren't in every single meeting, but know the play. That breath of fresh air and honest critique is something that I welcome and I think is very important and necessary.
Mm-hmm. As a bass player, I know it's so beneficial for me to play for people who play different instruments, because they hear things differently. You know, like a flute player is listening for different things than a viola player, and it's so good to get criticism from people who are in the arts and can see where you're coming from, but just have developed a slightly different view of the world. Yeah, that's super beneficial.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I always like to talk about communication because I think that's such a big part of everyone's job in theater is just constant communication. How do you navigate between communicating with technical directors and carpenters versus like the design team and the director and actors? How do you kind of go between all of these different groups of people that you have to communicate with?
So communication is key. It's about meeting people and being honest and open from where you're coming from. In a regional theater setting, if I'm talking to a technical director, because I do have experience in shops, I can have some conversation about build, but I haven't done that in years. It's not a thing I focus on anymore. So I am honest about what I'm visually trying to achieve and how I might go about doing it. But obviously, I don't know their systems or what works best for them in the space. So ultimately, I'll say, this is my visual goal. How do you think we should go about doing it? I'm a firm believer that active communication in achieving the goal is what keeps everyone invested in the project. And that goes for every discipline. Same with painters. I'm not the strongest painter. Never have been, never will be. It's not my forte. So when talking with a scenic artist, I grab a lot of research to be able to show the like real textures and ideas that I'm trying to convey, and then have a long, honest conversation about what those techniques might be to get the language across to a scenic artist correctly. I know the terminology, but I don't always know how to say it best. So I'll be open about that. I'm not the best painter, so here's my thoughts. Here's my paint elevation. Here's all of my research. I come to the table with a lot of things to be able to have that conversation, knowing that I'm lacking in the skillful communicative arts of paint conversations. And again, I always try to take the stakes out of the conversation. I think you can get a more honest, open conversation if it's not about make or break, life or death. Even in a budget conversation, hey, you're $10,000 over budget. Okay, cool. Let's talk about it. Here are the priorities. Here are the things that I think are important. Here are the things I think we can take away. Where does that get us? Oh, we're still $6,000 over. What are your suggestions? What are the things that you would find as big money savers? Let me take that to the rest of the team and talk about the priorities and get back to you. I will fight for the things that I think are important. And if it means that like we have to talk about going over budget, if it's something that I truly believe is important for telling the story, then it becomes the conversation of what I have to let go of in other senses or what I have to redesign. But I think being open, being honest, and being able to call out your own misgivings or shortcomings or lack of knowledge in areas has helped me a lot, just to have clear and open communication.
So like working with a music director, I'll sometimes tell them, just tell me what you want artistically, like, and I'll figure it out technically. And I think that maybe would apply to design too, like just telling people what you want artistically, like the vision, and let them figure out like the technical side of how to fulfill that vision.
Absolutely. And I had to retrain myself for that, because when I started designing again, after I'd taken like a break when I first moved to New York City, I was thinking too technically, and I had to retrain myself to say, this is the quote unquote pretty picture that I want. how do we achieve that from the technical specifications that you want to achieve it in? Mm-hmm. And not trying to dictate how something was built or painted or sourced was important. If it's a specific light switch or light fixture, whatever that is, fine, I'll spec it. I think that's important if the visual is important. But yeah, being far more open. This is the visual idea. Tell me how you want it. I'll figure it out technically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's real.
Take us through your background, where you're from, how you got into theater, where you went to school, and how you ended up in New York City.
So I was raised in Seattle, Washington, and San Antonio, Texas. I was a Navy brat growing up. My father was in the Navy, worked on submarines. So we moved around a lot. And then my mom and I ended up in San Antonio, which is her hometown. Went from a tiny school to a giant public school. And so my mom was smart in that culture shock of saying, I want you acting, because I had been a performer in middle school, had loved the theater department just as like a fun thing. And so I enrolled in Theater 1 as like an arts elective freshman year of high school. And the theater teacher for that class happened to also be the technical director of the building. But I loved being a part of the art from backstage. And I was 15 years old when I turned to him and said, I'm going to do this for like ever. How do I do it? And he looked at me like I was crazy. He was like, you're 15. I have 3 years to get you ready to go to college. Okay. And so, I kept up with my schoolwork. I got my good grades. My teacher was really smart and said, go visit as many of these colleges as possible. Put your feet on the ground. Make sure you like the culture, like the place. And I went there with my mom to tour for like a week because I was also interviewing for a scholarship program. And by like day 3, my mom turned to me and was like, I should have just brought the deposit. You love this place. I just fell in love with Ithaca College and Ithaca, New York. The culture was amazing. The people were amazing. It was a great 4 years. I really submitted myself to the process. And after Ithaca College, I moved straight to New York. And I mean, Ithaca College kind of pushes people towards New York. That's the industry, part of the industry that we have the connections in. That amplified and coupled with the program wildly encourages working at summer stocks in between the school year. And so after my freshman year, I did a summer at Barrington Stage Company in the props department. And then the next summer, I went to Williamstown Theater Festival and ended up spending 8 summers there. And that also built my network and connections in New York City. So it made a lot of sense to move straight there after graduation. I did another summer at Williamstown, packed my whole life into my truck, and moved to New York. And I haven't left. I mean, I've left for work, but I've been living in New York for the past 8 years now. Loved every minute of it. And it was a rocky start. When I first got to New York, I wasn't ready to be a set designer on a personal level. So I started working in props. I worked in carpentry. I worked in a couple of studios, but I just wasn't there. I got caught up in making good money and existing in New York as a carpenter. And something shifted 4 or 5 years ago. I missed telling the stories live on stage. And so I quit my job, went back to Williamstown, this time having switched departments. My colleague asked me to apply for the design assistantship at Williamstown. And so I took that summer and started to work that design muscle again and reintroduce myself to the New York design base as an assistant and as a working designer. And through that, made the connections with several designers and started working for them as assistants full time. The big ones being Lee Savage, Rachel Hauk, and Arnolfo Maldonado. And I've been in all of their studios. I think I was with Lee for like 2.5 years. Rachel's been an ongoing collaboration for the past couple of years. I was a full-time assistant for her for like 6 months. Have been an associate for her on multiple projects. Most recently, What the Constitution Means to Me on Broadway and on tour. Arnolfo, I was a studio assistant and associate, most notably on A Strange Loop. And then in the past 2.5 years, my own career has taken off to the point where I'm primarily designing myself and only assisting and more so associate designing on the projects that are exciting to me.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome that you worked with Rachel Hauk. I interviewed her, and it's still to this day one of my favorite interviews. I love how her mind
designer.
Works. Yeah.
It was a great pleasure and honor, and a wildly amazing learning experience to be in the studio with her.
Mm-hmm.
Her research process it was amazing the first time I sat down and worked on that process with her. The breadth of amount of images that she will bring together for a singular project.
So was there any, working with Rachel and Arnolfo, was there any like commonality between working with designers at that level? Was there any like characteristic that they all shared, or what is something that's common amongst designers of that level?
I mean, everyone's process is different. We all have the same vocabulary and the same tools, but how we use them is different. The commitment to putting the best product on stage, and more than anything, the thing that I've learned and the thing that I find most striking about the commonality of designers in general, and to the ones that are successful and great and that I look up to and respect, and there are a lot, but is their desire to support the text and not get in its way, and do the thing that best supports the artistic vision of the playwright and the director. We are all artists and divas in our own way. We're all self-absorbed and love the thing that we do. But at the end of the day, it's wild how selfless set designers, creatives are. All of these designers are singular in their focus to put the best version of that script on stage. And being around that drive and that professionalism really affected how I approach scripts and approach the way that I design. Mm-hmm. And that was a really great experience.
What's it like navigating New York City as a freelance designer? What have you learned to like help you survive? Was there anything that was unexpected about trying to make this life work? Talk about freelancing in New York City.
Sure. Always really fun. New York City is wildly expensive. Uh-huh. And we all know that, but it was still a kick in the face when I first moved here. Being an assistant, when I started that career and kind of restarted my life in New York City, I took a massive pay cut. I had to remember that as an assistant, you're going to work double time. So 9 to 5, I would work for designers and assist them in their studios or tech or whatever. And then I would go home, and 6 to midnight, I would work on my own projects in my living room, at my table, in my bedroom, at my desk, whatever it was, staying out of my roommate's way so that I don't take over the whole apartment. And you do that for a long time. That hustle is a part of the process. It takes a lot of self-care. It takes a lot of knowing when to say no. And it takes a lot of scheduling to know from this time to this time I'm with this person. I'm grabbing dinner here. It's going to take me an hour to get home, so I have 5 hours to work on this model or to do some image research. The thing I had to work really hard to do in that time was to take care of myself and remember to eat and remember to sleep. Because all of a sudden it could be 3 a.m. and I have to be at work in 6 hours. I need to go to bed. So that was the first part of it. I think the other thing that's important for young designers or for anyone in that game is to do one thing a day to advance your own career. Be it work on your website, work on your mission statement, work on your resume. Even if it means once a day you hop onto offstage jobs or backstage jobs, I forget what the name is now, or Playbill, and look at the job postings, send 1, 5, 0 applications, but one thing a day, just to build that momentum and to get yourself used to that, because it is a self-starter industry. No one's going to make you do it but you. If you want to make it, you have to do that work every single day and establish yourself. So if it's an hour, take an hour. If it's 20 minutes, take 20 minutes. But whatever it is, once a day, do that thing. If it's teaching yourself Vectorworks or AutoCAD or Photoshop, right? Coming out of my undergrad, I was not well versed in Vectorworks, and I had to teach myself that. A lot of Google, a lot of instructional videos just to get myself comfortable with that program so that I could be a good draftsperson in the professional world. But I did that every day. It's really easy to overstretch yourself. Every freelancer does it. Every freelancer comes into a week where they're like, I only get 4 hours of sleep this week. And it's the worst week of your life, and you never want to do it again. But if you can avoid that, if you can look at your hours of sleep, your hours of conscious time as a resource to allocate, we should work hard and take on a wide array of experiences when you're first starting out so that you can start to really single in on the things that you like. But we wear it as a badge of pride in the industry when we overwork ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's a thing that I think we really need to address. I don't want to do that anymore. And I've taken very specific steps in my career to not do that as much as possible. But it steps into, can I make enough to pay my rent, or do I have to take on more work? And that's still the thing everyone's going to balance. And it's even harder at the assistant freelance level. The difficulties are the same when you're the designer. They're just a little more complex. But yeah, do one thing a day. Be on time. Be easy to work with. For me, I will say, I will invest my time and money into an assistant or into a colleague who is easy to work with and I can grab a drink with or a meal with at the end of the day. And so being easy and non-stressful to work around is really helpful and will get you jobs. And I think as an assistant, one of the things that's most helpful is to anticipate the needs of your designer. Always be forward thinking. So and that takes time to learn your designer's styles and their working processes. But like once I had learned those styles and processes of the different designers and flexibility to work in those different ways, I could then say, I've done the research. Should I do this thing next? Instead of needing to be told what to do, anticipate what's next in the process and what will help move the process forward for your designer. Even if it's saying, hey, we're running low on ink, can I place an order? Because I saw that we're running low on ink and you might not have seen it. Or I started working on modeling these things because you were in a meeting and I didn't want to waste the 30 minutes. You know, I finished task 1, moved on to task 2, or what I think would be task 2. Can pause on that and move to something else. Where do you want us to be? Those are all really helpful things in the studio, outside of the studio.
So I noticed on your website, on your resume, you do a lot of like new plays and world premieres. What do you like about getting your hands on a new work?
I love everything about new works. I think what's really exciting early on in the process is how open everything is. You get to ask about world building in a really interesting way. I love working with living playwrights. The conversations about what they're trying to say, what they're exploring, how to visually represent that, how to give visual voice to these worlds is so exciting and so challenging and can change in an instant. I think the challenges of new plays and new ways that people are thinking about the craft of telling stories on stage is exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the same about, I really love new music, like working with living composers. Like I feel like I can resonate more with something that's written, in my lifetime or in the past 50 years, like even more so than I can with like Beethoven and Mozart. I don't know. There's just something about art that's from your, time in history that just, for me at least, it just resonates more, and I can pull more out of it than I can from something that's been done over and over and over. But
what I love about new works is to struggle with and grapple with and explore the challenges, problems, discussions happening in society today while they're happening.
Mm-hmm.
If you can hit that nail on the head in the sense of what you're trying to say visually and get your audience to empathetically understand in a new work, that's the best. In this digital age, we've been having a lot of conversations about liveness. I'm currently participating in the Liveness Lab with the Orchard Project. And so we're having a lot of conversations about how to create a sense of community in a digital screen space. And what are the ways we can push the medium? What are the analog ways that can help that? All of those things. But what it has consistently reminded me is that I really love the moment right before the play starts and right after the play finishes, where you can hear the collective breath of the audience. And I'm really excited to get back to that. But I think there's such an anticipation in new work that collective breath is so exciting in that moment. For new plays and new musicals, there's just something so exciting about the wild success or the wild failure of exploring the new play. Especially because in scenery, you'll have to finish the design when they often are going into rehearsal finally, and the script may keep changing. And so all of a sudden, a whole section of the set could be wrong, and it takes an extreme amount of care and presence to support the playwright in those changes with script changes throughout rehearsal. And I love that process. It's hard, don't get me wrong, but it's worthwhile.
Yeah.
It's been some of the most fulfilling projects that I've ever worked on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the same. I don't know if I've ever worked on like a new musical, but in terms of like new music, looking back, those are my most rewarding like performance moments and moments in rehearsal is working with composers, and has been around new work. So I can definitely relate to that.
Absolutely.
You won an Antonyo Award. Talk about the work that you won that award for and what the process was like.
So I won for my design of Native Son at Playmakers Rep in North Carolina, which was a really exciting and great project. A fairly new work. It made its off-Broadway debut here in the same season that I did it regionally. It was with the acting company, if I'm not mistaken. It's a really exciting new reinterpretation of the piece written by Nambi Kelly. It's very fast. It's very wide-ranging. So it was a really fun project to dive into about the unfulfilled dreams of a Black man and the ways in which society kept him down. My friend texted me with the link on Playbill being like, "Hey, congratulations on your nomination," which totally took me by surprise, which was really amazing. But man, the Antonyo Awards, to watch that live stream was so affirming and so welcome, at the end of 100 days of quarantining and being stuck in the house, to see so many people that I love and admire and respect be recognized in their nomination, and to see such talent win these awards was really exciting and really affirming. And shout out to Broadway Black and Drew Shade, who runs Broadway Black, for putting together an amazing, genuine performance. It brought so much joy to so many of us. To be able to commune together, again, even in a digital space, that sense of community for those few hours was amazing.
Yeah, it's exciting to see, since this was the first year they've done this. Is that correct?
Yes, it was the first year.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to see how this helps the landscape look a little more diverse in theater, over the coming years.
Yeah, and I don't think that was ever particularly Drew's intent or Broadway Black's intent. I think Broadway Black, the platform, has looked to elevate and amplify the contributions of Black artists in the theater world, and I think that's important. And I think Drew has always wanted to put out an award show. This just seemed like the time to celebrate Black people. I'm voting for everybody Black. I'm rooting for everybody Black. Yeah, I really hope it continues. And I'll be excited to go in person next year.
So I always like to ask people, as my closing question, advice to young designers. So what advice would you give to young scenic designers who are just starting out in their career?
Be open. See as much art as you can, and not just theater. I think the greatest storytellers are the storytellers who read the news every day, who know what is going on in the world, and who expose themselves to the plurality of thought. So go to the free student hour at the Guggenheim or at the Met or whatever museum is around you. If you can, for every project, buy one art book or one piece of tool that helps you expand your worldview. I try and get 1 or 2 new books or resources with every project as I do my research. Give yourself time. It takes time. Don't try and rush yourself. Take care of yourself. The thing that I still hold close to my heart is that we, in choosing to be theater professionals, often took this pastime, this hobby that we love and that brought us joy and brings us joy, and we made it into how we make our living and pay our rent and pay our bills. And that fundamentally changes your relationship to the work. And so it's important to find the other things in your life that bring you joy and to explore those. Burnout is real. Be careful of it. So go to the museum if you want to, read a book that isn't about theater, watch a movie, go for a run. You don't always have to be doing theater 100% of the time. I love theater. I live, breathe, work theater most days. In the video call that we're in, you can see my studio behind me. I'm kind of surrounded by it all the time. And I love theater, but I read so many other books just for fun because reading gives me so much joy. I read sci-fi, I read fantasy, I read detective novels. I just read things that let my brain go other places. So I'm not inundated in theater all the time. Things that I'm exploring now outside of theater have kept me energized for longer while doing the work. And it took me a long time to find that. So if I could give that to a younger designer earlier so that they stay in this business longer, I'll have done a good thing.
The music for the Backstage Creative was improvised and performed by Ian Leroy, and the logo was designed by Zach Rimbold.